Okay, very much. Great. Welcome back to Senate Education. Final business for the day. We're yesterday, and we're so pleased to have the three of you with us, talking about S303 and act relating to support for Vermont's young readers. And one of the things we have been talking about, if you've followed our work, is whether or not we should have principals, superintendents, other administrative staff take the 46-hour modules that we're having teachers take. And so, Ms. Myers, we'll start with you. Your thoughts.
Hi, Chelsea Myers, Associate Executive Director for VSA on the record. For the record, I just want to, I've been listening a little bit today, introduce or reintroduce Amy Miner, who is not only our VSA president, but also I've heard you saying a lot about the Standards Board for Professional Educators. She is also the chair of that group. So I figured inviting her and having her available to answer some of those questions with her vantage point on that standards board would be helpful. We do have some brief testimony to read. Is that what you would like, or do you want to just go into a discussion?
I mean, let's I think generally, do you think administrators should go through this training? Maybe start there.
I think my first response to that would be, I have not gone through all of the 46 modules.
Okay.
I haven't done all of the hours. I did sign up and I was able to complete module number 1.
Okay.
And so, I'm going to answer based on that premise. I think if in most cases, a building administrator is evaluating the performance in the classroom of a classroom teacher. And so if we are wanting administrators to be able to improve classroom instructional practices, they have to understand what we are looking for from instruction. And so I think there is a connection with, if you want to transform literacy education in a school district, I think your administrators have to be in alignment with what those goals are in order to drive action plans and give feedback on what's happening in a classroom.
So you would say yes?
I would most likely say yes. Do they need to do all of those 46 hours? That's really hard for me to answer without moving through the training. I will say, I have some questions about the online modules that are on the AOE website. I think really strong professional development can absolutely impact a student's learning and experience and the level of instruction that teachers provide. I'm not sure what I've experienced thus far in the modules is engaging and will directly result in an entire school district moving their literacy instruction, just because I haven't moved through those modules. And so the delivery model for me was part of one of my concerns, just looking at section 2 and that last sentence of section 2B, where it talks about developed and offered or approved by the AOE. I think every teacher wants, and every administrator wants, students to have high literacy scores, right? As an administrator, my hope is that every student in my school district is on grade level for reading by the end of grade 3, because in order to access the content that starts in grade 4, you have to be a really strong reader. So not being on grade level can be a challenge there. I think for me, I would love to see that language involve having the AOE not be the only driver of those decisions, but having a committee that involves teachers, administrators, and the AOE working together to develop this literacy training and to approve the literacy training. That would really, I think, improve the relationship, the fidelity of what we're trying to change, and the understanding of why this literacy training is important.
Great. So that could be, we might already have that set up in the literacy, with the literacy council. Maybe, I don't know.
Yep, when I read through that literacy council section, that
Yeah.
connection wasn't made strong enough for me. And so
Okay.
I think if you could make that more explicit, I think that that might be helpful. I think my biggest concern is if we're going to require teachers to do any amount of training, we
Mhm.
really need to make sure it's going to be relevant to what's happening in their district and in their classroom, engaging and impactful. And so I think trying to build that is a great spot for collaboration.
Senator Kilo, if you agree, saying something.
No, no, it was about the camera, but no, that's a really, great observation and suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very good. So yeah, we can talk, as a committee, we can talk a little bit about that. I like what you're saying, have a group of people. So for example, what I'm imagining is if a teacher says, all right, well, I'm now taking this literacy class. It's a 3 or 4 credit class. Why do I need to do both? And does this equate? Is this good enough for what would happen in the modules? This group of people could have those conversations and decide. And it sounds like that would be a great group of people to actually decide, yeah, that's exactly what we want you to be doing. And so, Ms. Minor, I would just say, if in all of your free time, which I know you have just literally none of, if you can think about might those 3 to 5 people be, if that would work with teachers and others on determining that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it would really be important to have
I like
teachers.
that. Yeah, yeah. And that buy-in, okay, it's not just the agency of education that's secretary saying, yes, that's good, it's bad, but a group, yeah.
Exactly. And I think for me, when I started to go through the modules that I was doing, the modules provide great information. But what is a challenge is that disconnect between the work that's happening in your building based on your building's action plan and scores, and me as an individual classroom teacher moving through a self-paced module where I can play and answer I can play kind of the recording and then answer. That is not always the most effective modality to change my classroom practice. So if there was a connection, with thinking about how can districts deliver this so that it really is impacting more than me just doing this to get my licensure renewal, which is
That's right. Senator Gillett.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. How do you feel about coaches and their ability to transform our current situation?
I think that coaches are critical. We have seen tremendous math growth in our district with our math coaches. We have added reading interventionists. One of our areas of growth would be to provide more coaching specifically in the area of reading instruction. And so what is helpful about a coach is that real-time feedback. Coaches can do modeling of a new strategy so that the teacher can watch that and practice. Coaches can give real-time feedback when teachers are doing small group or large group instruction with a reading strategy. And so I think they play a really important role of taking the textbook knowledge that you need to learn around what is best practice, and then to transform that into application that becomes natural for every classroom teacher.
What's your district, may I ask, Ms. Minor?
I'm in Colchester.
In Colchester, great. Yeah, we talked a little bit, I mean, one of the things, committee will correct me if I'm wrong, with the coaching piece is it's so hard to find teachers right now, and coaches, and paras, but I get it, having somebody there would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's that, you can take a course and you can move through a module and have a level of understanding, but then being able to apply that new skill, the coaches and the building level administrators have an important role in that, especially if you want those new skills to be implemented with fidelity in a building, in a district, across a state.
So I may have a understanding then of the coaches. So would coaches be people who you might already have employed in, for example, third grade teachers, also the coach, that kind of thing? Fourth grade teachers is a coach.
I think there's different models for
Yeah.
how districts use coaches based on the resources and the FTEs that you have.
Right.
Sometimes that might be a side stipend. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full time position.
Great. So in addition to thinking about a little bit about what this committee makeup might look like, if you've got a rock star coach in your district, and I'm sure you do, it'd be great to have a conversation with him or her at some point, and maybe you could just pass that information along to Morgan, just so, you know, we throw these words around. Sometimes I assume, oh, that's this, but it would be great to talk with somebody and how they work, how they operate. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, so Chelsea, do you have anything else that you want to add before we switch to Mr. Nichols?
Yeah, just a couple of questions or just observations about the bill in terms of, I do recognize that you've been talking a lot about those online modules and talking about that as a requirement, but in the bill, I'm not sure that it is quite clear that the modules, the online modules, are that the training required itself. And especially when you add the provision of it can also be approved by the Agency of Education, it's not clear, for example, the number of hours or the type of training. So I think just more clarity around that and the kind of dosage of the training would be super helpful. We're definitely in support of continuing the Literacy Council, and just have some further questions that I'm happy to provide in our written testimony. I'll send it after. And Amy, I've read her testimony as well, has a couple of those questions that you could just look over. I know you've had a marathon afternoon, so I'll
That would
send
be
that.
great, Chelsea. I
Right.
appreciate that.
Mhm.
That would be terrific. Anything that you've seen draft 2.1. Yeah, so
Yeah.
any kind of clarifying questions, if you would send them along to us and copy Ledge Council as well, that'd be great to kind of keep this all moving and fluid. But Ms. Myers, on the topic specifically, anything else to add around the training piece of administrators? It sounds like, and I don't want to put words in Ms. Myers' mouth, but you know, again, if you're going to be evaluating teachers, good practice to have similar training.
Yeah, I echo what Amy said, and also just would add that she surfaced a lot of like the best practices in professional learning, which I spend a lot of time with, like things like coaching and putting into practice and things like that. So we just have questions about how those modules would translate to some of those best practices in professional learning, but agree that administrators have to have the knowledge in which they're evaluating and giving feedback to teachers on in order to effectively be coaching those educators in their practice. So yes, completely agree with Amy. And I would just, the last sentiment is, I think it was Senator Weeks yesterday asked about kind of like, how do we know if we're successful? So if we give 46 hours of training, is there a mechanism in which we're going to assess in a couple of years if teachers feel, for example, more effective in teaching literacy, and if literacy skill scores are going, while not necessarily causal, if they're going up in the state of Vermont?
Yeah. Great. Thank you both so much. Mr. Nichols, can you top that, or you just wanna, or you just wanna call it a day?
Well, I wrote down some notes, and I can actually type it up into testimony and send it to you folks. I don't disagree with anything that Amy and Chelsea said. And I looked at the bill last night after I got home from Montpelier. It was about 7:30, typed some things up. And I was thinking that the bill was requiring all licensed educators to go through the modules. That's how I read it. And maybe I read it too quick.
Now, that's how I read it as well, but we'll check into, with our council. But our question specifically for you is whether, let's say, we want to know if administrators should be pulled into this.
Are you talking K-4 administrators?
But we're talking K-12 administrators.
Yeah, so I would think about that a little bit with high school administrators, whether or not we'd want to go down that road. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but if I'm a high school principal and I'm responsible for the physics teacher and for the AP chemistry teacher and AP government teacher, typically if I'm an administrator in a high school, I'm not going to have the content knowledge in every single area that I'm going to be responsible for.
Fair enough.
But I am going to have, hopefully, a real strong understanding of pedagogy. I think with reading, it's a little bit different. At the K-4 level, I used to, as a superintendent, tell my administrators that when the teachers are getting trained in, and I'm just making this up, Mathland, for example,
Yeah.
you need to be there getting the training with them so you are really clear on the practices you expect to see in the classroom and so that you can reinforce those best practices. I think the same thing holds true for reading. So if I'm a K-4 principal or elementary principal, K-5, K-8, and our teachers are being trained in these modules that hopefully are approved and not just by the AOE. I think the licensing, the literacy council that we've talked about before, I think that group should be very important in this. People like Gwen Kamoli that are real experts in literacy should be helping the AOE make sure that whatever programs are requiring of school principals and educators that are teaching reading, that they are, they're research-based, that they're effective, and that the training that they're receiving, the module part scares me a little bit. I think there's a lot of power in coming together. Humans are social animals, and working with other people in a group together. Maybe you're taking the modules and then you're talking about them together. You're working on implementation together. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I would not want to be a check the box exercise where I just go through modules on my own while I'm drinking wine at night or whatever. Now, I don't drink wine, but if I did, and checking the box. So I would really want to make sure that there was a way to really make sure that the actual learning that we want to see occur happens.
I think it's a great point, and the other witnesses made it as well. Is there a way to, again, maybe as Senator Gulick mentioned, incorporate a coach or have sort of this stuff happen in districts in a different way, just not like you're saying, checking off the box. I know Ms. Myers was and well, so were you, instrumental when we put this money toward this, but you don't want it to just be, hey, I did this, and it not be as deep and as meaningful as it possibly could be.
Sure.
And yet, you also want to recognize teachers are incredibly busy, letting them do it, some of this when they have the time to do it, also seems to make sense.
Yeah, I think flexibility is important. And, it's one of those things where are you going to be loose and where are you going to be tight? And I think we need to be tight on this needs to happen. We need to make sure that we're really strong, especially in pre-K through third grade at least, and really understanding that reading is a dynamic field and new findings are continue to emerge, and researchers are increasingly considering the intersection of traditional literacy with digital literacy, for example, something we talked about a little bit in this committee, which is becoming more relevant in the 21st century. And the research on reading continues to inform educational practices and policies across the world. So we want to make sure we're tapping into that, having it's just like being a doctor, right? Or being I just got a tooth pulled yesterday. So it's like being a dentist. You want people with the latest research techniques that are doing the best job they can. And we want to make sure that our pre-service training in our colleges through the ROPA process, there really is more of a focus on literacy teaching. I have teachers tell me that they had one class in teaching literacy, and they're coming out with a degree to teach college and to teach in the elementary school from our colleges, and they're nowhere near ready. So I think focusing on that.
Yeah, no question about that.
Too. Yeah.
No, it's
and then to Amy's point,
situation.
and to Amy's point, I might have a instructional coach in my system, any town school district, and that person might be the best person to help organize this for our group. In another district, it might be one of the principals who used to be a reading instructor and has a master's in reading. Another place, it might be, we're going to work with this consultant who's really strong in this area. And I think all those have merit.
statewide average for ninth grade language arts proficiency, which I know isn't literacy. 36.7% in the state of Vermont. That's a real problem.
It is a problem. There's a question of whether or not it's real or not, because as we know, every year we have kids that take 5 minutes to take the test, when it's the NAEP assessment, or even, and we don't know if kids are really trying or not, or so there's all those factors too. A better assessment is our local assessment system should really be able to give us a good idea of whether kids are on grade or close to on grade level. And many kids start out in kindergarten already 3 years behind. And it's one of the reasons why the VPA keeps pushing for preschool, because the research is pretty clear that preschool helps fix that gap. But even that said, when we're doing our own local assessments, you're absolutely right. We do not have enough kids where they're supposed to be by the end of third grade, and certainly not in the upper grades either. So attention
We
to
have
the
districts
system.
as low as 12%. We have districts, 27%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue. You're absolutely right. It's our number one academic issue.
Yeah. Okay, great. This has been incredibly helpful. Ms. Minor, don't be a stranger. For some reason, we don't have an opportunity. We know you have another full-time job, but your testimony is great and very helpful.
Great, happy to assist anytime.
Chelsea, thanks a million. If you don't mind sending those questions along, that would be great. Jay, not bad. Not bad. Okay, overall.
I'm never going to get the Chelsea standard, but I'm working on it.
That's all right. For 4:55 in the afternoon, not bad.
I just
Thanks,
sent
Jay.
those to Morgan, so they're
I
already
really appreciate
in
it.
there.
And I'll send Morgan my remarks too. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Everybody, have a
Bye,
great
everybody.
evening. Happy Valentine's Day.
You
Happy
too.
Valentine's Day.